Malik stepped forward and raised the fire poker. "You're not taking me." But the creature didn't rush. It just stood there, watching, waiting. Then Thomas had an idea. "The names," he whispered. "That's how it picks." He grabbed the box and tore the paper inside into pieces. Malik reached over and dumped salt into the open coffin. The creature screamed. Its mouth didn't move, but the sound filled the room, high-pitched, furious, and ancient. Thomas Kane was a quiet man in his 30s, living alone in a small house on the edge of town. He wasn't married, he had no kids, and he spent most of his time collecting antique items. His house was filled with strange old clocks, dusty paintings, and furniture that cracked when touched. But nothing excited him more than what he found at an estate sale one rainy Saturday: a beautifully carved wooden coffin. It was dark mahogany, covered in strange symbols. Thomas didn't recognize it, and it looked much older than anything else he owned. The seller didn't know where it came from, only that it had been found in a barn on a farm that had been abandoned for years. To Thomas, it was perfect. He didn't plan to use it for anything except display, just a creepy, rare prop for his collection. He brought it home, cleaned it up, and placed it in the corner of his study. That night, he stared at it for hours. The carvings seemed to move under the dim lamplight, shifting like they were breathing. He chuckled to himself. "Just my imagination," he said, turning off the light. But the next morning, the coffin lid was open. At first, he thought maybe he had forgotten to close it properly, but there was something else. A thin trail of dirt from inside the coffin across the wooden floor. Not just dirt. It looked like something had been dragged. Thomas shook it off. Maybe the wind from the window. Maybe it was old dirt trapped in the wood. He closed the coffin firmly this time, and even placed a small stack of books on top of the lid, just to be sure. That night, he had a hard time sleeping. Every part of the house made his heart jump. He got up once to check on the coffin, and it was still shut. But when he woke up the next morning, the lid was open again. The books were on the floor, and this time the dirt trail led all the way to his bedroom door. Thomas stood at his bedroom door, staring at the dirt trail. It was faint, like someone had walked barefoot across the floor after crawling out of a grave. His heart beat faster as he followed it with his eyes, starting from the open coffin in the study, down the hallway, and stopping right where he now stood. He bent down and touched the dirt. It was damp and cold. That made no sense. There hadn't been rain the night before, and his windows were shut tight. He told himself again and again that there had to be a logical reason. Maybe something had fallen inside the coffin, maybe an animal. Still, the fear in his chest wouldn't go away. He grabbed a flashlight and carefully examined the inside of the coffin. There were no hidden compartments, no signs of an animal nest, just more of the same strange dirt and a faint smell, earthy, old, and slightly rotten. That's when he noticed something that hadn't been there before: a small handprint in the dirt on the inside of the lid. It was smaller than his own, like that of a child. Thomas stepped back, the flashlight trembling in his hand. It had to be a joke. Maybe the seller at the estate sale had done something to mess with him. But who would go this far? And how would they even get into his locked house? The next night, he set up a camera. It was an old security camera he had used for his front porch years ago. He connected it to his computer and pointed it directly at the coffin. He wanted proof, something to explain about what was happening. Maybe he would catch the lid simply popping open on its own. Maybe the floorboards shifted. He didn't really believe that, but it was better than thinking something was crawling out of it. Before bed, he double-checked everything. The coffin was shut tight, the books stacked on top, the camera was recording, the door was locked. But Thomas barely slept. And when he opened his computer the next morning to check the footage, his hands began to shake. The coffin had opened at exactly 2:46 a.m. The books slid off on their own. Then something dark, something long and thin, slowly climbed out. And right before the video ended, it turned and looked straight into the camera. Thomas froze in front of the screen. The thing that climbed out of the coffin was not fully visible in the video. The lighting was poor, and the camera quality was old, but he could make out its shape: long arms, thin legs, pale skin. It moved like a spider, but walked like a person, slow and silent. Its body twisted in ways a body shouldn't. Two hollow eyes stared directly into the camera. Thomas slammed the laptop shut and backed away like the creature could crawl through the screen. His mouth was dry and his breath came in short, sharp gasps. What did he just watch? What had he brought into his house? Trying to calm himself, he reopened the laptop and rewound the footage. But when he played it again, the screen went black. The file was gone, deleted. He checked the storage folder. Nothing. As if the video had never existed. The camera was still connected, still recording, but everything it captured overnight had vanished. Something had deleted it. With trembling hands, he unplugged the camera and locked the coffin shut again. This time, he wrapped it in chains from the garage, looping them tight around the lid and snapping a padlock to close it. He even dragged a heavy chair over it for good measure. And then he left. He couldn't stay in that house. Not that night. He grabbed his car keys and drove around for hours, unsure where to go or what to do. Part of him wanted to go to the police, but what could he say? A coffin I bought spits out monsters every night? They'd laugh, or worse, take him in for a mental check. He finally parked in a public lot and slept in his car, cold and cramped. When he returned home the next morning, the chair was tipped over, the padlock lay broken on the floor, and the chains were twisted like something had ripped through them from the inside. The coffin was open again, and on the wall above it, smeared in dark dirt, were 5 letters. Hello. Thomas stared at the word on the wall, unable to breathe. The letters weren't just drawn, they were smeared. Thick, moist clumps of dirt formed each one, stuck to the paint like glue. He touched one letter with his finger. It was cold, wet, and fresh. He backed away, his hand shaking. The smell was stronger now, like wet soil mixed with something rotten or old meat left in the sun. His stomach turned. Something had definitely crawled out of the coffin again, and this time, it had greeted him. He ran back to his laptop, praying that maybe this time the camera had caught something useful. Something that hadn't been deleted, but the folder was empty. Again, no sign of footage. The camera logs showed it had been recording all night, but someone, or something, had removed the evidence. Thomas opened a blank Word document and began typing everything he'd seen. If he couldn't prove it with video, maybe he could at least write it all down. He described the movements, the look into the camera, the dirt trail, the message. He needed something to keep him grounded, to remind him that he wasn't losing his mind. He started searching online, desperate for answers. He typed, old coffin symbols, creature from coffin, coffin dirt message, carved mahogany coffin with symbols. Finally, he found a match on a dusty forum for occult collectors. A man had posted a photo of a nearly identical coffin 2 years ago. Same carvings, same shape. His post read, "Do not open this. Do not bring it indoors. Burn it. Bury it, destroy it. It doesn't stay shut at night. It watches you, it learns." There were no other replies, no updates. The user hadn't posted since. Thomas sat in silence, his heart pounding. The thing wasn't just escaping, it was learning. It knew about the camera, it knew about the locks. It was aware, and now it was trying to talk to him. Later that day, Thomas heard something strange, scratching, soft at first like nails on wood. It was coming from inside the coffin. But what froze him in place was the second sound. It was whispering his name. Thomas. Thomas stood frozen, staring at the coffin. The voice had come from inside it. Not loud, not angry, just soft, like a whisper carried on wind through trees. But it said his name, clearly, gently, too gently. His legs felt like stone. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to leave the house and never come back. But he couldn't move. Something about the voice rooted him in place. It wasn't just calling to him, it was pulling him. Slowly, he stepped forward. He told himself he wouldn't open the coffin, he would just look at it. The lid was already half ajar, even though he had chained it up before. The chains now lay in a tangled mess on the floor, split at the links like they'd been snapped by teeth. Thomas, the voice said again. It was closer now. It wasn't whispering from inside the coffin. It was whispering from under it. Swallowing hard, Thomas knelt beside the coffin and lifted it slightly. The wood creaked under his fingers. Beneath it, he saw more dirt. But this time, something glistened in the shadows. 2 tiny white objects. He leaned closer. They were teeth, human teeth, small, yellowed, buried in the dirt like roots of a plant. There were more too, scattered pieces of bones. Not old relics, not fossils, real bones, recent and fresh. Thomas stepped back and knocked over a lamp. The bulb shattered, throwing the room into dim shadows. His breathing became rapid. He clutched his chest. He had brought something evil into his home, something that fed, whispered, and watched. He dragged the coffin to the garage and covered it with a tarp. He didn't care how valuable it was. He needed to get rid of it. He had to burn it, smash it, or anything. But that night, the whispering followed him into his dreams. In the dream, he stood in the woods, the coffin resting between 2 trees. He was holding a shovel, digging into the earth, and from behind him, the same soft voice said, "Thank you for letting me out, Thomas." He jolted awake in sweat. The room was pitch black, the power was out, and someone, or something, was knocking gently on his bedroom door. The knocking was slow, rhythmic, almost polite. Thomas sat up in bed, his heart racing. The room was so dark he couldn't even see his hands. The power was out. The air was cold, too cold, like winter had slipped through the cracks of his house. He reached for his phone. It was dead. It had been fully charged the night before, but now it wouldn't turn on at all. He grabbed the flashlight from his nightstand, his hands trembling, and he clicked it on. The beam flickered weakly but stayed on. He aimed it at the door. The knocking stopped. Thomas sat frozen, staring at the door, afraid to speak, afraid to move. Then he saw something, a shadow under the crack of the door, with bare feet motionless. He stepped off the bed slowly, careful not to make noise. The floor creaked anyway. He waited, then without warning, the door slowly creaked open, but there was no one there. Thomas moved closer. On the floor just outside his door, something sat in the middle of the hallway, something small. He bent down to see it clearly. It was a tooth, fresh, white, still wet with blood. He stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. He didn't care what was happening anymore. He didn't care if he was going mad. He just knew one thing: the coffin had to go. At sunrise, he dragged the coffin into the backyard. It was heavier now, as if something was inside it. He didn't look. He couldn't. He doused it in fluid, grabbed a box of matches, and struck one. The flame danced in his shaking fingers. He dropped it. He watched as the wood cracked and burned, the symbols twisting and curling in the flames. The smell was worse now, burnt dirt and rotten meat, but he didn't care. He stood there for hours, making sure nothing remained but ashes. That night, he finally slept peacefully, but when he woke up, the coffin was back in his study, and this time, it was open. Thomas stared at the coffin. It sat exactly where it had been before, against the far wall of his study, untouched, unburned, and wide open. The smooth, dark wood looked polished again, the carvings deep and sharp like they had never been touched by fire. Not a trace of ash, soot, or damage. His mind raced. He had watched it burn, every inch of it. Flames had wrapped around the wood, melted the metal hinges, and reduced it all to a pile of blackened remains. He had stomped through the ashes. He had made sure it was gone, but here it was. Back and inside it was a new gift. Thomas stepped closer, against every instinct screaming at him to run. Inside the coffin lay a bundle of fabric. He reached out hesitantly, and he unwrapped it. It was a photo, a picture of him, sleeping in his bed. The photo was new, printed on glossy paper, taken from the foot of his bed, showing his body under the covers, his mouth slightly open, his eyes shut tight. Someone, or something, had taken it last night. Thomas dropped the photo and ran to the study door, slamming it shut. He dragged a heavy bookshelf in front of it, blocking the entrance. Then he ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. He didn't know what good it would do, but holding it made him feel less helpless. He called his friend Malik, the only person who wouldn't laugh at him. "Bro," Thomas whispered, "I need you to come over. Please. It's urgent. I think something's in my house." Malik didn't ask questions. He said he'd be there in 20 minutes. Thomas sat in the living room, staring at the hallway leading to the study, holding the knife in his hand. The house felt darker than usual. Colder, like the thing inside that coffin wasn't just hiding anymore. It was watching. Then finally, Malik arrived. Thomas jumped up and ran to let him in. But when he opened the front door, Malik stood on the porch, his face pale, his eyes wide. He was holding something in his hand, a coffin-shaped box. "I found this outside your front door," Malik said, voice shaking. "It has your name carved into it." Thomas took a step back, staring at the small coffin-shaped box in Malik's hands. It was about the size of a shoebox, dark wood like the big one inside, carved with the same swirling symbols. Right on the lid, in bold curling letters, was one word: Thomas. "Did you open it?" Thomas asked, his voice shaking. Malik shook his head. "No, I don't know, man. This is weird. What's going on?" Thomas looked over his shoulder toward the study door, still blocked. He grabbed Malik by the arm and pulled him inside. "I'll explain everything, but whatever you do, don't touch the big coffin." They sat in the living room, the little box between them on the table. Thomas told him everything, from the first night that the lid opened, to the creature caught on camera, to the coffin burning and reappearing. Malik listened quietly, his hands gripping his knees, his face getting more tense with each word. "Bro," Malik said finally, "we need to destroy both coffins. Now this is some cursed object stuff, maybe even demonic." "I tried," Thomas whispered. "It came back." Malik slowly turned to the small box. "Then maybe it wants something. Maybe this is a warning." Thomas took a deep breath, then nodded. He grabbed the little box with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a single, rolled-up piece of paper. He unrolled it carefully. There was a name written on it, not Thomas's name, Malik. Malik froze. Then suddenly, every light in the house flickered and went out. The room plunged into darkness. The temperature dropped like a switch had been flipped. Frost formed on the windows. The silence was deep, heavy, alive. Then from behind the block study door came a thud, another, then a slow, steady scratching.
Thomas.
The voice called again, but this time, it was followed by another whisper.
Malik.
The thing in the coffin had learned a new name. Malik backed away from the table, knocking over a chair. Nope, I'm not doing this, bro, he said, his eyes wild. This is not a joke anymore. Thomas stood frozen, holding the piece of paper with Malik's name. It was still warm, like it had just been written. The ink hadn't even dried yet. This thing, it's choosing people, Thomas said. Or maybe it's claiming us. A loud bang slammed against the study door. The bookshelf shifted a little. Then came the voice again.
Malik.
Followed by a faint scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across wood. Thomas turned to Malik. We can't wait. If it calls your name, it's not going to stop. You saw the box. It was me first. Now it's you. That means it's getting stronger and smarter. Malik wiped his sweat from his face and tried to think. We need help. Thomas nodded, grabbed his phone, and of course, it still wouldn't turn on. Okay, Malik said, shaking. Let's do this the old way. Salt, fire, and prayers. Whatever it takes. We fight this thing. We don't just wait for it to drag us into that coffin. The two men headed to the kitchen. Malik found salt and began sprinkling it in lines across the doors and windows. Thomas grabbed matches, candles, and anything flammable. They lit candles in every corner of the house, hoping to push back whatever darkness had settled inside. But as they worked, the study door slowly creaked open. They hadn't touched it. They hadn't even heard the lock break or the bookshelf move. Yet it hung open, and beyond it, the coffin sat, glowing faintly under the flickering candlelight. The carvings on the lid were no longer still. They twisted and pulsed like veins under skin. The coffin was wide open. Inside, the dirt had formed shapes, handprints, footprints, claw marks. Then came a sound that made their blood freeze. Something crawled across the floor. It wasn't walking. It wasn't standing. It was dragging itself limb by limb across the hallway toward them. Thomas whispered, "It's not just watching anymore. It's coming." The sound was horrible, scraping and slow. Each movement echoed through the house like a shovel dragging through mud. Thomas held a candle in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. Malik gripped a fire poker, his breathing sharp and uneven. The thing in the hallway hadn't fully shown itself yet, but its shadow stretched long across the floor, moving toward them like a growing sickness. "I see it," Malik whispered. The thing rounded the corner. It was tall and thin, its skin gray and stretched like old leather. Its limbs bent the wrong way, and its mouth was stitched shut with black thread. But worst of all were the eyes, wide, white, and full of hunger. It looked at Malik first, then at Thomas, then at the little coffin-shaped box still sitting on the table. Malik stepped forward and raised the fire poker. "You're not taking me," but the creature didn't rush. It just stood there, watching, waiting. Then Thomas had an idea. "The names," he whispered. "That's how it picks." He grabbed the box and tore the paper inside into pieces. Malik reached over and dumped salt into the open coffin, shouting, "In the name of God, we cast you out!" The creature screamed. Its mouth didn't move, but the sound filled the room, high-pitched, furious, and ancient. The lights exploded, the windows shattered, and wind burst through the house like a storm. Thomas grabbed the matches and lit the remaining paper scraps. Malik tossed them into the coffin, along with more salt, candles, and a cloth soaked in fluid. Flames roared. The creature lunged. Thomas swung the knife, slashing its arm. It shrieked again and recoiled, backing into the smoke-filled study. As the coffin burned, the carvings on it began to melt and drip like blood. Then the creature collapsed. Its body convulsed, then crumbled into ash. The house fell silent. Then the ashes disappeared. What would you have done if you found a beautiful old coffin that wouldn't stay shut? Do you think Thomas is free, or has the curse only just begun? If the box with your name appeared at your door, would you open it? Not everything beautiful you see you must bring home. Some things are meant to be left alone. Please, if you enjoy the story, please share, like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating stories.